Morning, everyone. I want to welcome you out to our NAIOP live presentation today. My name is Jason England. I'm the NAIOP Utah Programs Chair. We appreciate you joining us this morning where we're excited to hear the details of the POINT Framework Plan. Before I introduce our guest, we'd like to thank our 2021 chapter sponsors. You should see those on the screen. There we are. Huge thanks to all of these groups. We appreciate the support and involvement that they give us year after year, program after program, to help us put on a good slate of events. Okay, honored to introduce Alan Matheson. He is the Executive Director of the POINT Mountain State Land Authority, where he's charged with preparing for and overseeing the development of nearly 600 acres of state land. Today, he'll be sharing key elements of the recently released framework plan for the POINT. I'll turn the time over to Alan, where he'll give his presentation. We'll then have some questions that we'll pose, as well as the Q&A from the audience. Feel free to submit questions via the Q&A box at any time. You don't have to wait till the end, so get those in. If it's something you want to hear about, and we'll give Alan a good amount of time to answer everything we've got for him. Alan, I'll turn the time over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Jason. I appreciate it. And it really is a privilege to be here. You know, you are the folks that are really building our communities and have so much to do with who we are as a community, what we look like, and how we operate. And so I know I've got a lot to learn from you, and we look forward to partnering with you as we move ahead. Participated in NAIOP a couple of weeks ago. What a fantastic event. It was a great opportunity to see many old friends and to meet with many of you. So I think one of the first things we want to do is a poll question and get a sense for who you are. If you could take a few seconds, answer what your background is. Looks like we've got a good mix and a healthy dose of others. That's great. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to, nice that we've got a mix, people that are involved in many different stages of development. That's great. I'm going to share my screen now and just kind of give a little presentation on the framework plan that we released recently and share some background about the POINT, give you a broad overview of where we're heading, and then look forward to an opportunity to answer some questions. You're familiar with the site. It's currently occupied by the Draper State Prison, 608 acres, really in a prime location, right along I-15 and the Bangerter Highway. Future transit route will come through the site and down into Lehigh. It's at the intersection of two fast-growing metropolitan areas, between major universities, served well by an educated and capable workforce, right in the heart of Silicon Slopes. So in many cases, it's really ideal. And I think being recognized nationally as one of the great development opportunities in the country over the next few years. The legislature recognized that this was a great opportunity and in fact gave us some marching orders. These are our directives to accomplish at the site, and you can see that they're ambitious and in some cases a little bit conflicting, but it's job creation, having a highly trained workforce, making sure that we're advancing the quality of life for people throughout the state. That includes transportation. It includes a sustainability piece to ensure that we are generating fewer emissions, using less water, using less energy, that we are coordinating with surrounding communities, that there's recreation and outdoor space for people. I love the vision. I love the fact that it's ambitious. I love the fact that it's going to stretch us as a community to accomplish those purposes. We're led by a really capable board of 11. The co-chairs are the Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson, and Representative Lowry Snow. And the board itself includes 4 legislators, the lieutenant governor, 2 mayors, the heads of a couple of key state agencies, and private sector development expertise. Good board that understands the importance of this project to the state. The board's adopted some guiding principles. These are things that lead us as we make key decisions. Number 1 is that we recognize that we are stewards of a public resource, a piece of land that's owned by all residents of Utah. And we need to make sure that we are promoting the public interest in this project. We've also decided we want to set the standard, meaning we want this to be a model project, one that maybe is pushing the envelope of development in various areas and can be a model for future development, something that developers and architects and others can learn from, and we can learn from them. Next is think regionally. We understand that this is just 600 acres, but it's surrounded by about 20,000 acres of undeveloped land. We know that what happens at this site will have implications in the region and surrounding communities. So we're going to work toward benefiting the region ahead of just trying to focus on this 600-acre parcel alone. Taking the long view, we want this to be done right more than we want it to be done fast. So we are going to be thinking about the next generations, how we can be patient as we move ahead and ensure that we're accomplishing the public vision as a primary goal. And then the rest is kind of process stuff, which is so important. We want to be open and transparent. We want the public to know what's happening with their project, and in all cases, acting with integrity. We've involved the public a lot in this process through working groups, stakeholder advisory committee, reaching out in surveys, open houses. And in the last year, we've involved over 10,000 people in providing input and ideas and the values they want to see reflected at this site. Out of that public process come 6 key vision elements. These are areas of emphasis for our planning, and it includes having a community that is open and welcoming, that accommodates a range of ages and socioeconomic situations, that's a gathering place, mixed use, that's active. We want a transportation system that is future focused, gets people around easily, and a place where the car is not king. Economic development is a key piece here. We want to have a return to the people of the state, creating jobs and careers that are world-class. We see this as an innovation community, a place where there's a culture of creativity, where ideas can be nurtured. And so all that we're doing at this site is really targeted at bringing in the best innovation talent and being able to create opportunities for solving our society's challenges. Sustainability, as I mentioned earlier, ensuring that we're doing our part to preserve the beauty and the healthy lifestyle of our area by using less water, using less energy. And finally, collaboration. And I touched on that earlier, where this has to be a community partnership. We don't have a lock on the best ideas. We need to make sure that we're bringing in the talent of the community to do this right. So this is kind of a rendering of the plan as it was conceived by our planners, SOM, Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill. It's based on all of this input, the goals that have been established, with a real emphasis, as I said, on innovation. One of the founding concepts was this 15-minute city, a place where you can access the daily needs of life within a 15-minute walk. And this will be kind of the first planned ground-up 15-minute community in the state. This is an illustrative part of the plan. You can see here that there are a number of features that are kind of interesting. One that I think everybody loves is this kind of northwest to southeast river to range trail that will connect the Jordan River Parkway to the Wasatch Trails on the east. It'd be a great opportunity for active transportation and commuting, a real recreational site. We have a number of parks and open space through here. You know, one of the key planning goals of municipalities around the country is to have a park within a 10-minute walk of all residents. At this site, there will be active green space parks within a 2-minute walk of every resident and every employee. Got a central park in the middle, a place where people can gather and enjoy time together. There's a transportation system that I'll point out a little bit in the future, but got an area for an innovation district that we're developing in partnership with the Utah System of Higher Education. Great office space for corporate headquarters, a range of housing types that meet the needs of all those that work here. This gives you a little bit better of a sense of the framework plan. And you can see that kind of magenta line that runs through the site. That's the planned transit route. Bus rapid transit will come from the Draper Frontrunner station, run down through the site, 2 stations within our site, then across I-15 to the east side and down into Lehigh. We think that that's going to be a great opportunity for getting people around our site. There's a mix of uses here. This is kind of general land uses, with residential being more yellow and the blue being more of the office innovation piece. Of course, the red is part of our entertainment retail hub. The fact is that uses are pretty mixed throughout this site. And we've done that for specific purposes, but we think it's important to have residential here to activate the space. So there are people active and involved in the evenings and on weekends, having a jobs housing balance that minimizes off-site traffic generation. Again, real emphasis on this being a gathering place where people from throughout the state can come together and enjoy concerts, even street performers, and just spending time together. You know, transportation is fundamental for the success of this project. And we've coined this term, a one-car community. We think this can be a place where, of course, people can have the vehicles they want, but they may not need more than one car, one to, for weekend trips, or if one of the household members needs to commute off-site. But to get around the site should be fairly easy. And we'll have access to commuter rail, to bus rapid transit, to an internal circulator that will help people access any area on the site, the micro mobility, pedestrian biking, etc. So this shows you again that transit route in the pink or magenta. And then a couple of concepts that we're exploring for an internal circulator. Again, probably autonomous and electric. Again, real focus on pedestrian and bicycles, and providing connections and allowing people to access areas of this site, all areas of this site, without having to get on a road. This is kind of an interesting concept. Again, a term that we coined called the pedestrian priority zone in our central hub. There aren't roads in the middle here. Businesses can get deliveries from the outside. There was parking available, but there'll be a real pedestrian emphasized experience in the middle. You're not having conflicts with roads and traffic. I mentioned that one of the areas of focus and priority is economics. and ensuring that this is a catalyst for economic activity throughout the region. We've had some initial work that's been done. It's, I think, pretty impressive by the Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah. And it's still to be refined and more numbers to come. But at a first cut, let me give you just a little bit of information. They did a couple of scenarios. One that looked at what would happen if we put a for sale sign up on this property, sold it to the highest bidder, and that it developed consistent with market trends in the area and projected market trends into the future. The second scenario was this vision that we've put together. And just a couple of data points. They determined that kind of the business as usual baseline scenario would generate 4,100 jobs at this site. The vision that we've created through this framework plan would create 47,000 jobs, an order of magnitude more. They said that the impact on Utah's gross domestic product under the baseline would be about $500 million a year. Under the vision, this framework plan, $6.9 billion, so about 14 times higher. What we do at this site and how we do it will have a lot to do with its success and its impact on our region. So we are looking for bringing in innovation catalysts, really thoughtful, cutting-edge companies. We're looking to have a research presence associated with our universities. So we're starting with basic research, nurturing those ideas through to commercialization, and opportunities for learning for students K through 16 to participate. Innovation accelerators and incubators. I mentioned the sustainability piece, which is really key, and it's something we heard from the legislature, it's something we heard from the public. And we've actually engaged partners to help us think through in more detail how we can maximize in a thoughtful, reasonable, cost-effective way the sustainability measures at this site. We're looking at strategies to dramatically reduce water use relative to surrounding development, less waste, exploring the net zero project. We just signed an agreement with Rocky Mountain Power last week to work with them on renewable energy resources. Mentioned over open space, which is key. We had many people that thought the whole thing ought to be open space, but having the right balance is important. We want to be able to create a place that attracts talent, that is an appealing place to live and work, place of recreation and activity. So we have detailed plans on all of the park space within this project. And then just to wrap up with this introductory piece, some of the renderings that have been provided. And you can see in the bottom left of the screen where on the site this is located. So this is the Central Park. Again, want it to be a place where people can get together and hear concerts or lectures or just enjoy a break during the day. This is from kind of the south side of the Central Park. Gives you an idea of some of the transportation routes. One of the main lines that shows a mobility hub, how both the circulator and the transit will operate, an emphasis on pedestrian access. And then you can see just, again, some renderings, this from the northeast, looking to the southwest. And this kind of a picture of that central hub that has office, residential, retail, and entertainment in it. So it's an exciting project, getting a lot of attention. And having laid this out, I think the one thing that I can guarantee to you is that what's finally built there will not look exactly like this framework plan. We know that it's going to evolve. The market will change, technologies will change. We also anticipate that as we engage with more partners and bring in our development partners in coming months, that they're going to have ideas that will improve this. We'll continue to engage with the public, but all with the goal, as we said earlier, of advancing the public interest and making sure that we create a place here that is internationally known and locally loved. So I think with that, I'll wrap up and we can turn to some of the poll questions and any questions that you have. So you can see here, here's the next poll question. What aspect of the framework plan appeals to you the most? And there are a number of elements there, but I'm curious what you think. That's great. You know, one of the things that I love about this is that we've got so many aspects of the plan that are represented here. And as we try to create a complete community, it's important to us that we not be all things to all people, but we certainly meet the interests and the values of the people. That's great. Thank you. And then would you like to learn more about the point via monthly email updates? And we will have an opportunity for you to share your contact information so that we can send more details to you as we move ahead. We try to reach out in various ways to the public, again, through email updates, through our website and various other sources. And I will mention our website, thepointutah.org, thepointutah.org. And on that site, you can see the full 500-page plus summary of this plan. Or if you're pressed for time, the very short 120-page executive summary. But would welcome your joining us on that site. So I think with that, Jason, we'll go to questions.
Yeah, Alan, appreciate that. That was very informative and helpful. On that last poll question, you may have seen that pop up in the chat. There's a link there where you can click and follow and get signed up to receive the periodic communications that the point sends out. So click that if you, I saw a lot of people said yes, so that'll be the way you want to do that. Well, a couple of questions. You mentioned that the point is really a generational opportunity for Utah, not only locally, but regionally. How do you feel that this framework plan demonstrates the expansion of the opportunity across multiple generations?
Well, I think there are a number of things in here that are important. And, you know, we've looked around the world for kind of 21st century city ideas and gathered ideas from, you know, Europe and Asia and around the United States. And, you know, it's not, again, not all things to all people, but it really is an attempt to incorporate the things that make sense here and that reflect Utah and Utah values. Some of the elements will be the sustainability piece. And as I mentioned, we've got some consultants on board that are digging deeper into identifying kind of good, better, best concepts in sustainability and the associated costs so that we can make thoughtful decisions with public resources. We've got a group that is doing something similar with smart city technology. We're hoping, again, to make this place of convenience that works for people and makes their quality of life better. The transportation aspects, we're trying to use cutting edge technology. And one of the things we're working on, and we've talked to various companies about it, is, you know, the air taxis that will be coming in the not too distant future. How do we accommodate them? Where do they land? How do people access them? But I think one aspect that sounds kind of mundane but is important is the fact that because this is owned by the state, we're not having to meet a quarterly budget forecast. We certainly need to provide a good return to the state, and we need to be moving ahead at a good pace. But we can be a little bit patient here and make sure that the market catches up with the vision, and that we build this in a way that it is relevant and, in fact, a real benefit for generations to come.
And following on that, obviously the hope is to create something that will benefit Utahns for generations. And you touched on it briefly there. What sort of detail on the economic benefit that this site will bring to the state in the coming years? How is that going to pan out?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about some of the sheer numbers, and as we've looked at jobs created and payroll and at revenues that will come into the state and to the local governments from this, they're significant. And those revenues, that economic activity, provides money for things that improve our lives, education for our kids, the infrastructure that we need to address the growth in our community, social services to help those that are most in need in our community. All of that's part of it. But beyond that, we think that by partnering with our universities, partnering with cities that are doing great things in innovation, we can help create kind of an economic or innovation ecosystem here that will rival any in the country, a place that will attract great talent. And we hope that that's not just about creating businesses, which is very, very important, but it's about creating businesses and ideas that solve problems and make life better for people. Another thing, and I mentioned this before, was the idea of being a model community. I learned long ago that talking about development concepts is somewhat interesting, but it's not always compelling. What's compelling is when you actually build a community that works, and new ideas that work, and then other developers and architects follow. And if we demonstrate ways that we can be a little more sustainable in our desert environment and help address air quality issues, then maybe others follow. And that spreads and creates broader benefits for the community.
Absolutely. Hey, you put up a few poll questions. I have a poll question that's only for you. This obviously has room for flexibility and change as market conditions shift and so forth. But as you look at the wide range of planning, whether it's sustainability, transportation, or innovation, the poll question for you is: what elements are most exciting for you? What gets you most excited about this framework?
Yeah, good question. And there are probably a number of answers to that, but I really like this innovation idea. The idea that we're creating a culture here, a place where there's an intersection of different disciplines where new ideas can be created. We'll try to have some programming here that will bring together people from different backgrounds. Opportunities for those working at the site to give lectures to others who work in the area, and maybe create some relationships or spark some seeds of ideas that will lead to additional solutions. But when you talk about the innovation, there are a number of elements to it. And one is getting talented people, and they want to be in a place that is convenient, that's technologically cutting edge, and that's very livable and appealing. So a lot of advancing that innovation piece is about placemaking and creating the kind of place that accommodates and facilitates those interactions we talked about.
Yeah, great point. Obviously, you mentioned the number of jobs that are created, the amount of people that are impacted by this obviously is enormous. So public engagement, you alluded to, as part of the planning. What efforts did you make to gather the public feedback, and how do you balance all of that and implement it into something that can't be all things to all people, but hopefully most things to most people. There's a lot of different opinions, and how do you balance and implement those?
Yeah, as you might imagine, there are a lot of ideas about what ought to happen at this site, and frankly, about as many ideas as there are people expressing them. And so part of our challenge was really to work through all those different opinions. And, as you said, and I've said, not try to be all things to all people, because that just won't work, but prioritize and find out what mattered most to the people that have weighed in. And so we did have various approaches. Certainly, we reached out to the general public, and we find that there's real wisdom in the public. They may not have all information and technical details, but they can help us understand what matters to them. And ultimately, we're trying to create a place that makes life better for the people of Utah. So understanding what their concerns are, their fears about growth and associated impacts on traffic, air quality, water use, et cetera, was really a driver for us. We also had a stakeholder advisory committee. This was composed of people from very diverse organizations in our community, hoping that they could represent sometimes underrepresented populations that could help us think through challenging issues like affordability in housing. And that's going to be an element of this site because of input from our stakeholder advisory committee. And then we have 5 working groups. These are composed of experts in our state in areas such as air quality and environment, innovation, education, research, economic development, recruitment, the land use and transportation balance, et cetera. And they gave us some real specific ideas and are helping us connect with some of the best thinkers and talent in the country as we move ahead. I might just maybe add a little bit more to what I said before. We've started a number of supplemental studies, and our board approved those last week. And I mentioned sustainability and smart city. We've also got someone looking at that transit circulator in more detail, much more detail on traffic generation, how our road system can work better, how we can fine tune that jobs housing balance a little bit. We're developing design guidelines for the site to provide real direction to the development community. We're looking at more refined cost estimates and a number of other things. So all of that information is going to help us refine this plan and work with others in a more informed way to get it just right.
Sure. A question on sustainability. Obviously, that ever-growing focus. We talk about well buildings and the need to preserve our home, our earth. How does the framework plan anticipate a sustainable development? Obviously, a lot of buildings, a lot of stuff going on there. How has sustainability been at the forefront of your planning process?
Yeah, well, we heard it loud and clear from the public. It was certainly part of the direction from the legislature. And so it is very much on our minds. There's some areas that we're focusing on primarily, and maybe I'll make a couple of examples. One is air quality. And, mobile sources are and have traditionally been the biggest source of emissions. So among other things, we've got this electric circulator that we're studying, encouraging traffic or transit. We are, one of our goals is to have 10,000 electric vehicle chargers in the site once built out. So there'll be, and part of our partnership with Rocky Mountain Power is to look at implementation of electric vehicles. But we're finding that building emissions are overtaking mobile sources as the largest source of pollution in our region. So the way we design and build our buildings is important. Reducing the emissions from those buildings, from heating systems, for example. We've got a geothermal resource on this site. It's not big, but we'll use that to supplement. We're looking at solar systems and other renewable opportunities. So that's one. On the water side, we're going to be very careful about landscaping. We'll be putting in appliances that use less water. We're looking at similar things even for habitat. That river to range trail I showed you also serves a purpose for migration for some of the wildlife between the Jordan River Parkway and the foothills. So anyway, a lot of things that we're looking at and continuing to think through.
Great. We've got a lot of poll questions that keep rolling in from the audience, so we're going to try and hit many of those as we can. A lot of them deal with timeline for development. So maybe you can give us at least a 30,000 square foot, or 30,000. Now there's the square foot developer in me.
Yeah,
30,000 foot timeline for how the site takes shape over time.
Yeah, great question. So a lot of this kind of starts with the move of the prison itself. So it's currently occupying as a correctional facility, or functioning as a correctional facility. The inmates are projected to be moved to the new facility out by the airport next summer. Once that happens, then we hope to be able to start demolition and any remediation shortly after that. So that'll probably go through part of 2023. Then it's getting in place the backbone infrastructure for our initial phases. And we would hope, and maybe a little optimistically, but we would hope that we could start seeing some vertical development in 2024 and 2025. Build out, of course, will depend on the market and interest and various other things, but that's the general development timeline. I would guess that there are probably some questions about development partners here. And maybe I can work that into that timeline a little bit. We are going to be looking very shortly for the first round of development partners to make these ideas a reality. And part of the reason for these supplemental studies I mentioned was to answer questions that potential development partners would have. So we're going to get those answers in the next few months. We anticipate going out with a request for qualifications later this calendar year and an RFP process probably early in 2022, with the hope that we'll have that stage one development team in place for next spring. They'll be involved, of course, in refining the plans, helping us think through the backbone infrastructure, working with potential project proponents, and getting the project started again on that time frame that we mentioned.
Yeah, you're correct. A lot of questions on timing and how to get involved. When RFQs are coming out, you've answered that. Do you have it broken up into phases in terms of RFQs for just phase one? Maybe what the initial mix of development is for phase one? Is it going to be residential? Is it going to be office? What do you imagine coming out of the ground first, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have generally phased the project, although we're working on refining that information now. And I think when we go out, we anticipate that we'll be looking for kind of a phase one development team that would put in some of the key backbone infrastructure, the north-south boulevard, some of the key roads, probably working with the state on some of that. And then the first phase, as we've conceived it now, would be a mixed use phase. we recognize that in the market, if we just put this out there, it would fill up with housing really quickly. And we want residential there, but not exclusively. We think that this first phase has to set the standard for this development. So it includes a portion of the central hub, that River to Range Trail, some of the office district, some of the innovation district, and some of the residential district on the west. So true mixed use community to start with. I know that creates a little more complexity, but think it's important to set the standard up front for what we want here if we're going to achieve our vision.
Mm-hmm. Is that rollout, the schedule of phases and whatnot, is that available anywhere for the public to see, or is it ever changing and so it's really not something to download just yet?
Yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock into it now, but if you go to that website that I mentioned and look at our framework plan, we do have kind of a phasing plan in there that's rough, and it'll show a couple of options that we're considering for that phase one. So yes, you can go and take a look at that, but understand that we're doing some refinement at this point, and it'll change, and it'll be outlined in our RFQ, RFP process.
Great. Now, one question here is particularly focused on the housing aspect. With housing costs that have skyrocketed, how's the point going to accommodate the wide range of workforce needed? Will there be room in the development for affordable housing for, say, the service workers that clean the buildings and work at the restaurants and whatnot? Or do you anticipate them commuting from other neighborhoods? So maybe share with us a bit about how you see the housing component in terms of the range of needs there.
Yes, well, we know housing is a big issue in our community. It has a lot of implications for broader affordability and our quality of life and our ability to recruit and maintain our economic momentum. We're looking at it in different ways. One way is that we're looking at broad affordability at the site, not just housing, but affordability of living. And the biggest factors in affordability are housing and transportation. Mentioned a lot about our transportation system and how that we're trying to develop it in a way you don't need multiple vehicles. So that saves some money. On the housing side, we're partnering with a number of community groups to look at strategies. We're reaching out to the Commission on Housing Affordability and working with them on a range of ideas. And it could be anything from designating a percentage of the housing at the site that needs to be in some kind of an affordability index to having kind of a fee in lieu on the site that goes into housing programs elsewhere, to sharing or reducing the cost of the state land to allow the housing prices to be lower. So there are a number of strategies we're looking at. Haven't settled on a specific strategy yet, but again, that's something that we're working on and trying to refine for our discussions with the development partners. This really, to be a community, has to meet the needs of a range of workers at the site, and to minimize traffic generation in the area, the same thing applies.
Right. So that we'll dug into a few details. We got one or two last questions here. This one kind of pulls back a little bit. You mentioned that you're looking at this planning from a regional perspective and had, looking at the surrounding 20,000 acres of future development. How did that play into the vision of the point? And what's the master plan, if there is one, for those surrounding thousands and thousands of acres still to be developed?
A lot of this discussion started with the Point of the Mountain Development Commission, which is a separate entity from the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. And the Development Commission started working in 2016 through 2018, looking at the broader Point of the Mountain region and what would need to happen there to create the greatest benefits for the state. And they developed through an extensive public process led by Envision Utah, a vision for that area. Think Sandy to Saratoga Springs. And a lot of the transportation ideas that were in that vision have been incorporated into the state's long-range transportation plan. And a lot of the values, in fact, if you look at that legislation that I showed you, all of those objectives in the legislation came out of that initial public process with the Development Commission. So it's a great example and probably a unique example of where public input was directly placed into legislation as kind of the marching orders. So those worked their way into our project. Now, so there is kind of a broad vision for the site. Obviously, most of that is private, and the private sector is going to decide what to do with those properties. But we hope that we can be a catalyst for setting a high standard and maybe generating some ideas that can be incorporated in some of that other development.
Sure. Well, obviously, the benefits that come aren't without a cost. So we do have a question asking about what you anticipate the overall cost of the site redevelopment to be. It's probably a big number, but is there a ballpark there that people are curious to hear about?
Yeah, and that's something else that's the subject of one of these supplemental studies. And so we're going to have much better numbers in the next couple of months. But as we did the framework plan, there was some engineering work that went through and estimated some of the costs. And for what we call Tranche 2, which is essentially the backbone infrastructure of the site, which would include the part of the river to range trail, other open space, sewer, water, electrical, the north-south boulevard from 6th West down to Porter Rockwell, some of the other key roads. That's kind of in the range of about 120, 150 million. When you start looking at the districts that'll be developed, some of those phasing and the shared infrastructure, that gets higher. And ultimately, when you start thinking about the cost of all the buildings and the development that's anticipated in the framework, that's over $2 billion. And that, of course, is not carried by the state fully. I think the state will probably participate in some of the early infrastructure, but I would expect most of that to come from the private sector.
Well, it's a very exciting project, an exciting time, and appreciate you taking the time to share that framework plan with us. Great time to be part of the state. We appreciate everyone who's joined us this morning. And with that, we'll wrap it up. We hope you found it of value. You've seen in the chat box the various ways you can get connected and follow the point with their framework. We'll watch for RFQs. The developers are keenly excited to be part of it, as well as all various CRE trades. So we appreciate you, Alan. Thanks again for your time, and we hope the rest of you have a great day. Thanks for coming.